Well, we are thrilled here at Portland Ovations to invite the wonderful composer Nokuthula Ngwenyama. Thank you so much for being here with us for this interview on your upcoming piece being performed, Joy Steppin, at the Portland Ovations Chamber Music concert.
Oh, hello, George. It's so wonderful to be here, and thanks so much for inviting me to write Joy Steppin for Portland Ovations. And I'm just so thrilled to be here to discuss the work.
Fantastic. I do want to start with a little bit of biography in terms of your heritage. I mean, you have such a beautiful name, which
Thank
has
you.
a wonderful both gentleness on the one hand, your first name means mother of peace, and then your last name means lion, which is, I'm a Leo. I was born in July. So I was like, oh, yes. So it's what a wonderful sort of balance between that gentleness and strength of your name. Can you talk to us a little bit about how your Zimbabwean Japanese heritage sort of informed your musical development and how it may have influenced and impacted your growth as both a performer and a composer?
Wow. Well, sometimes it's hard to think of what those influences might be because we're just born who we are, and we don't, our parents are wished upon us, so we don't actually really necessarily understand how those influences are entering our lives until, I guess, later. um, I know that my mother loved music,
Mm.
and that she listened to a lot of music in her pregnancy. Um, and a lot of Mozart. And
Oh,
so I think that might have come through, but then getting instruments from my uncle, like a thumb piano. It's similar to an mbita
yeah.
from Zimbabwe, but it doesn't have like the percussive, like bottle caps on it that rattle, and it's like a smaller thumb board, if you will, and in lieu of
Sure.
a keyboard with a
Yeah.
lower and higher octave. It's basically, I wish I had the instrument right here. It's basically kind of like a thumb piano, where the keys are flattened metal, I guess,
Strips.
kind of, yeah, strips. Or like they're not planks, but yeah, strips, so that when the thumb pushes them, they play a certain note, and the instrument rings. And then with the mbita, you put it in a gourd, and it like rings even more.
Oh,
And there is
beautiful.
mbita orchestras. But my uncle, when he moved back to Zimbabwe when I was quite young, he gave me, knowing that I loved music and I'd already started piano and started violin, he gave me an mbita, or well, it's not an mbita, a smaller type of
Yeah.
mbita, and I used to play that a lot growing up. And even though I'd never been to Zimbabwe, I'd kind of feel the sound of this instrument. So, yeah, I mean, I guess the soundscape of our youths informs like how we express sound on the
Mm.
page. So that might have been a way in which, um, I guess, some sounds that were outside of, say, the sounds that I would hear in LA. But in LA, growing up in the 80s, you hear everything anyway. So
Right.
there's the whole world is in LA. So um, I think those were the ways that music, maybe the Zimbabwean and the Japanese sides influenced the music. I started in Suzuki, but that's not unlike a lot of other kids, right?
Sure, sure.
And I also started with the Yamaha program on piano,
Oh
which
my.
I basically think passed me through at least 2 years of like music or ear training at Curtis, and just music theory and the solfege and stuff, was that
Wonderful.
Yamaha training. So, I mean, that invitation with the Yamaha
Mm.
training to
Mm.
just write my own music from the get go, like, here's a grand staff, here are some magnets, put the magnets on the grand staff, and let's play it and hear what you wrote. I think that probably really influenced me in becoming a composer, just that attitude. So,
That's
I
beautiful.
mean, I don't know how else to say
No,
it.
that's very rich. I mean, those early planted seeds are so important. I came to my own music education in a very weird way. My mother actually made me play the piano, so it's wonderful to see that you were sort of in the soup of music, both American and multicultural. It's beautiful. You know, I noticed in many of the pieces you've written and in the interviews, you have a very keen interest, it seems, in science. And I love the fact that we're way beyond music for music's sake and all of that. You know, the whole late 19th century idea that music stands on its own and so on. We know now, of course, that there's a much larger context for every piece that's written, whether it be on a personal level of the composer themselves, or be it societal, or all the influences that come in. But I noticed that science is a big part of some of your works, especially during COVID. I noticed the whole genetic code of the virus and how you use that. You talk about love of nature and Joy Steppin and other works. So thank you for bringing sort of the world into music beyond just the notes. There's also a beautiful narrative character, and I wonder if you could just talk about your interest in those aspects and making music part of a more global, spiritual, and natural context.
Well, wow. Well, thank you. Um, I did go to divinity school, so I guess I've been asking questions of the world in a spiritual sense, in a with with some curiosity and also with acknowledgement of the commonality of expression when we talk about, let's say, it's a higher power, something greater than our human experience, and how that's communicated through art,
Hmm.
and where the artist is and the role that the artist plays in that communication. So the artist is kind of a conduit for this universal truth, shall we say. And the artist just needs to be able to understand what is being presented through science, through nature, not through necessarily, I mean, holy books are great, and there are some wonderful stories in all of them, but in a sense beyond words, even
Hmm.
that we understand that we have a universal connectedness. And so I think I've been asking those questions a long time, and there are different ways at getting to an answer, which is in and of itself not even a full answer, and not even in it's in a way that we as human beings can understand. So so that is kind of, I guess, the deeper spiritual
Yeah.
search with the
Hmm.
music, but
Hmm.
it is, I'm so inspired by nature and the messages that nature gives us and the joy it grants us. And so that, I think, I mean, I just, you can hear I get so enthusiastic even talking
Yes.
about it.
Yes.
But when I write, I endeavor to be open to those messages and to communicate them, and to, and what I hear from those, from asking, is the journey. That's the journey. And then translating that, what I hear, then onto the page and to the musicians, like the members of Espressivo,
Yeah.
who are going to play Joy Steppin, is really, it's a joy for me to be able to express that to them, and it's I'm so grateful that they connect with it and that they've
Hmm.
enjoyed playing it and presenting it for
Indeed.
audiences
Indeed.
like
Oh,
the
and
audience tonight.
I couldn't imagine a richer uh, resource of artistry and creativity and wisdom in music making than that particular quartet. So I'm thrilled for you to have to really hear the work thought through and performed with care and love.
Yes, I mean, that is the greatest compliment and the greatest
Yeah.
kind of it's not about ourselves. It's about expressing this music and expressing this sentiment and expressing this connectivity to as
Indeed.
many people as will listen.
I try myself to talk to my students about, first of all, what's the image? What's the sound? What's the mood of a piece? And now, what do you do with your instrument to generate that image into the world, into the room, into the sound? I recall in one pre-concert talk you gave, you said the piece came to me in A minor. So how do you translate, when we talk about synesthesia and music and color, but how do you translate all those deep emotional feelings and ideas into actual musical composition? What's that journey for you, creatively speaking?
Well, I I think it's about being open, remaining open to hearing, to being sensitive enough to hear the way things feel.
Mm.
And then to be honest with that feeling, and so that we can be honest with what we hear and translate that onto the
Mm.
page. So it's about expression, right?
Yeah.
Um, but that's the whole range of emotion, right? So, yeah, I hear stuff. I hear it. When I look up at the sky, I hear something. And I don't know if that's called what, I mean, I don't know what that's called. But it's just being sensitive enough to heed what I'm hearing
Yeah.
and to allow, it's kind of like there's a soundtrack going on with my reactions.
Hmm.
And in a way, not all the time, but when I'm open to it. So, I mean, like even now, I can hear certain stuff, but it's just like it's kind of cloudy, but it has a
Yeah.
feeling. And so
Yes.
it's like, okay, so what would best be part of that feeling? And I don't know if it's like kind of rolling cymbals with some kind of lower trombones,
Hmm.
or if it's um, kind of a soltasto tremolo on lower strings.
Hmm.
Do you see what I mean? So you start
Yeah.
to play with how does that, what does that sound? What is that cloudy feeling, for example? So, and then experiment. And then
Yeah.
grab the instrument. So you should tell your instruments, go grab the instrument like I'm going to do. And okay, granted, I have a viola. You can grab the instrument like I'm going to do. And granted, it's a viola. It's not super low, but you can get really kind of a cloudy, but imagine that with kind of a low cymbal that doesn't expand and like low trombones. Same
Oh,
feeling,
wonderful.
right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it takes control for the percussionist not to let the cymbal open, but to keep
Yeah.
a low roll. But
Mm.
think about the possibilities of where that phrase is going to go.
Yes,
So
indeed.
this kind of stuff excites me.
Yeah, yeah, amen. Yeah,
So
good.
that's how, I mean, I think with students, it's like just delve in. Start
Yeah.
and it takes a lot of imagination, right?
Yes,
And being open to that. And we should encourage, I mean, I encourage healthy imagination with all of my students. That's the
indeed.
fun part.
Yeah, and in the context of education, there's a kind of freedom
Mhm.
that we lose a little bit with the whole bottom line attitude of education in terms of grading and, right answers and wrong answers. So
Yeah.
let the music play and let's continue to promote that kind of freedom that you're talking about. Very exciting. Um, I want to move to the commission itself and
Yes.
the process of someone reaching out and saying, "We want a piece from you." Uh, and then the conversations that ensue, the ideas that come that you talked about being back here, or sort of foggy at first and then slowly deciding what sounds you want to use. Talk to us about this particular commission. Sharon Robinson picks up the phone, calls you, or sends an email. What happened at that point? And I recall you talked about it's a collaboration. Having premiered various commission works myself, I know that that's mostly true. On a couple of occasions, the composer had a very strong sense of what they wanted to happen.
Yeah.
But mostly it's a wonderful, exciting back and forth that can really make you feel a part of the composition itself as a performer. Now you're on both sides, which is really wonderful, amazing. And I don't know when you sleep, but bravo.
I'd
Talk,
like to sleep more, actually.
yeah, talk us through that journey from that initial phone call or email to where we're going to be on January 25th when this piece gets played.
Yeah, well, just a little backstory. I had gotten a commission to write the Kalkstein Laredo Robinson trio, a piece either for trio or for piano quartet. And so I chose piano quartet because I wanted to play with them. And then wrote a piece honoring the 400 years of systemic racism entitled Elegy.
Mm.
And we toured with that piece. Sadly, Joseph Kalkstein passed away before the premiere. So we ended up touring with that piece, and Anna Polonsky ended up joining the quartet. And it was received quite well, and I loved playing with the group. And then Jamie Laredo and Sharon Robinson knew that they couldn't ever really play trios after Joseph Kalkstein passed away, but that they really loved playing piano quartets.
Hmm.
And so they formed the group ESPRESSIVO with Anna Polonsky and Milena Pajaro Vanderstadt, who's an amazing violist. And they asked me to write the
Oh,
first commission for this
oh,
new
wonderful.
group, ESPRESSIVO. And they play so expressively together. I know all of their playing intimately, having played with all of them. And so that's kind of the dream of a composer, to be able to play or to write music for players that we
Mm.
know and admire, and know that and trust that their musicianship will be partner in this process of bringing this music to life. So I definitely see them or hear their playing in the score when I'm writing for them, and I
Mm.
do with every commission. And so and it actually ends up becoming more playful for me because it's like, oh, I'm gonna write Sharon a solo right now. And she's gonna stay with that root, that core of Joy Steppin she gets because she called me, right? So she starts off, and then she continues with that. That is the
Mm.
core, the seed of Joy Steppin. So when you hear Sharon do that, you'll know you're in the heart of the piece.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
So it's a
Wow.
great process. It's a great process, and then getting to go and hear them in the first rehearsal, and having my instrument and being able to play, and just being able to kind of vibe out on it together, not just like looking at the score and being like, yeah, 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 but actually being able to jump in there at times is
Right, right.
really fun too. It's such a treat for me. I love it. And then hearing the world premiere and hearing how they connect with the piece and take it to a place where I didn't even think it could go, but it's a better place. And I'm like, oh gosh, you guys, it's your piece now. Like it gets to that point because I can think it and I can bring it to the page, or I can translate it um, from that cloud of creativity, and bring it to the page. And but they then interpret it with their connection to
Mm.
creativity and bringing things to life, and then it goes from there, and it has a life of its own.
Beautiful. And, having a background both in string and piano playing gives you an amazing advantage in terms of writing for that particular ensemble. So I'm sure it's wonderfully written out, and I look forward to looking at the score someday.
Oh, thank you, thank you.
Bravo. Tell us about your journey from performer to composer. Was it linear, or as you mentioned in your early training, there were magnets you'd put up on a board and sort of that initial creative act of making music on lines? Was that an organic process for you? Did they go side by side, or was there a moment where you wrote something and said, "Oh, maybe I could do this"?
Well, I think it started at the very beginning because of the
Mm,
Yamaha training I
yeah.
received. But then I would hear things that I couldn't stop hearing. Like I would get entranced with this thought or this kind of idea, and then it would just continue to develop. Like I couldn't let it go.
Yeah.
And then it was like, then it almost became like that thing that keeps running in your head, and like I had to write it out to let it go.
Mm,
So it almost became a compulsion. And so there were things that I would think about or that I would hear that would just develop kind of through the days or weeks or whatever, and then finally I would just get it down.
mm,
Um, Great training and being able to and enjoying sitting. Actually, I started improvising on the piano before I felt more comfortable kind of improvising on a string instrument. I think there's something about the piano, you can fill in harmonies, you can kind of fill
yeah.
in rhythm with melody, and that kind of allowed for like a larger sketch, like
Mm,
or a larger like ability to sketch in a larger way as opposed to like a single line, you know.
yes.
But there were certain, and then I like to sing as well, and so there were certain things that just all kind of, I mean, I felt like I thought about music a lot, and I liked to do that. That was pleasurable for me.
Mm.
And then I had theory training. I had continued
Oh,
really
yeah.
great theory training and encouragement. But I never thought of myself as a composer
Hmm.
until I was in sixth grade. My teacher, Mrs. Helen Cranmer, she was the orchestra teacher at Pacific Palisades Elementary School. She asked whether or not I might be interested in writing a piece for an LA Unified School District arts competition. They were getting submissions from kids all across the district in lots of different fields, photography, like painting and drawing, and one of them was composition.
Hmm.
And so I said, okay, I'll compose something. So I composed a piece for violin and piano, like it's like a 12 measure, 16 measure piece, like mist rolling up in the mist in the canyon, something like that. I don't know where it is. I saved all my work, so it's somewhere. But so I submitted the piece. I recorded it with two cassettes, you know. So I recorded
Oh
the
my God.
piano part, and then I recorded playing the violin part with the recorded piano part,
Oh
and
my
then I
God.
sent it in with a handwritten, like 12-year-old scribbly scrabbly score, and it won.
Oh wow.
So it won for composition, and so I guess that's the first time I was like, oh, I got a composition award. Like, okay. Still didn't think of myself as a composer. No, it's like I just did it because my teacher asked me to do it. And so then I go into high school. And so I should say my first Yamaha teacher, Ann Patel, Miss Annie, she got me to put the notes on the page. She's still in LA. She's still teaching. She's taught so many amazing people. Um, and then Mrs. Cranmer, in sixth grade. Then I enter Crossroads School for Arts and Sciences, and I get to study with Marianne Cummins, who is
Hmm.
still teaching at Crossroads School.
Wow.
and Dr. Herbert Zipper and Warren Spaeth. Three amazing musicians, harmony, counterpoint experts, educators, so encouraging. And I'm doing an assignment for Marianne and a Christmas carol, a holiday carol.
Yeah.
And I submit the arrangement for string quartet of Jingle Bells. And she looks at it and she looks at me and she says, Thula, you're a composer.
Hmm.
Just like that.
Yeah.
So then I was like, oh, maybe. I don't know. Like, I always enjoyed doing it. And I was doing it on the side, kind of like closet composer. Um, but in any case, I was preparing, I was an instrumentalist. I was hitting my instrument hard. I was rehearsing. I was really in full music training mode. And my mother discouraged me. She said, no, don't, you need to practice. You need to focus on this. You need to, don't worry about composing. And it was actually probably really good advice because
Mm.
I got to mature as a performing
Yeah.
musician and know what it really is to hit the road and do deep,
Mm.
deep dives into some really great literature.
Yeah.
I knew what it was like to sit in an orchestra and hear the sound unfold around me, to understand what voicing and emphasis of and really mean in sound.
Mm.
And
Mm.
so when many years later in 2014 I got a call from, and I would write, I continued to write my own things. I
Yeah.
did some arranging things for people who asked, like, oh, could you arrange such and such, because they knew that I could do it, and I was like, oh sure, yeah, I could do that.
Yeah.
But very in a casual way.
Mm.
I didn't take, I mean, I just didn't think about developing it further because I kind of was just in the playing mode
Yeah.
and that. So when I received a call from the Pilgrim Rest Baptist Church in Phoenix, which is the largest Black congregation in Phoenix, to write a processional for their bishop who was celebrating his 35th anniversary with the congregation. I jumped at the opportunity. And basically, as I hung up the phone, I realized I guess I'm a composer now. And it just evolved from there. Once I started writing professionally,
Yeah.
I couldn't stop. And it was like, okay, well, then I need to keep writing. And understanding that it's only through writing that we really improve. Like,
Mm.
get whatever, it's like, oh, this isn't good enough. I'm not going to take it seriously. Whatever that thing was, it's like, well, maybe I should take it seriously. And in
Mm.
order to take it seriously, I have to keep doing it and make it better and
Yeah.
improve and try to figure out how to really communicate what I'm hearing to musicians. And, so that they understand and that I don't have to actually write too much, that it's like as clear as it possibly can be. Simplicity is bliss, that kind of thing.
Mm. Well, thank you, Mom, for the advice because, in fact, it was at an age where you had the time and energy to really, as you say, take a deep dive into all of those significant issues we need as performers and listeners of music. So that becomes
Mm.
our sort of spiritual food as we begin to express in notation or what have you. I love your whole process. And when you were talking about experimenting with sound, it reminded me of I had the privilege of playing for Sofia Gubaidulina in Europe many years ago as a young pianist. And her contribution to sound and the the crazy in the things she uses to make sound in her orchestral works and the way she
Yeah.
talks about sound all around us and she's always listening to things reminds me very much of your engagement with that idea and that process. So bravo to all of that. I do have one more question um, for you. I did some research a couple of years ago for a museum concert here at Bowdoin College, where I teach, about the history of Black female composers. But I also know, having watched many interviews here on campus and around, the country, that not every artist wants to have a designation of being this kind of composer or that kind of composer. And I recall that Amy Beach was sometimes described as a composer who happens to be a woman, as opposed to a woman composer.
Hmm.
And I wanted to ask you what your relationship is to being a Black female composer, as opposed to a composer who's a Black female, multicultural in the United States, and if that has any
Well,
significance.
well, I'm very proud to be part of a tradition of Black female composers like Florence Price, like Julia Perry, who has
Mm.
just knocked my socks off with her violin concerto. And in fact, I'm going to be arranging one of her pieces, songs, on my next concert in February for Phoenix Chamber Music Society. So, I mean, that's an amazing legacy, and it's just one that I wish more people knew and celebrated.
Yeah.
And beyond, I guess, Black female composers, to the point where here are some amazing composers who also happen to be Black and female, right? So, I mean, it's like which either or, as long as we're celebrating wonderful composers, doesn't matter, right?
Indeed.
Like, let's just celebrate great music written by great composers.
Indeed.
But I find them both to be incredibly inspiring when I write, because it's not easy to write. It's not easy to really commit to what to commit to to anything, I guess, in life. I mean, but when we make that commitment, it's made with our whole selves, right? And so that's what I admire about both of them and about all great composers, because they do that with their scores.
Well, you have surely graced us with your amazing personality and energy and enthusiasm. I feel very inspired myself at the moment, and we're
Oh,
so thrilled to have you uh, come here and enjoy your work next month. It's just amazing. Thank you so much for sharing very, very thoughtfully and sensitively your journey as a composer and in writing this beautiful work. So
well,
wonderful to
thank
meet
you.
you, Thula.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to speak, and thank you to Portland Ovations for being a co-commissioner of Joy Steppin.